Welcome back to Real Talk with Susan Stone and Christina Supler. We are full-time moms and attorneys bringing our student defense legal practice to life with real, candid conversations. Today's podcast is going to tackle the issue of hazing. And what a lot of you out there may not know is that Christina and I have looked at hazing from many different perspectives in our career. We have defended students accused of hazing. We've actually been asked to help a Greek organization against accusations of hazing, and we have represented victims of hazing. So we have a real 360, don't we, Christina?
We do, and we're, as our listeners may know, we're located in Ohio, but we handle cases across the country. And what's interesting is that Ohio has been a real hotbed of this activity, though, of course, it happens and students across the country are dealing with these sorts of issues. So we're excited to jump into this topic today.
I really am too, and I am super excited about the guest we have. I feel very fortunate. I want all our listeners to know before we give our name out that we reached out to him and we just kept at it because I really wanted this guest on the podcast. So with that, why don't you do the intro?
Sure. We are joined today by Hank Nuwer, who is a renowned anti-hazing journalist, author, and scholar, known for his unwavering dedication to eradicating hazing culture. With over 4 decades of experience, he's authored many influential books. He maintains a comprehensive database of hazing deaths, and he continues to be a leading voice in raising awareness and advocating for prevention efforts in colleges and beyond. Welcome, Hank. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
And I got to add, we just learned Hank lives in Alaska, so we got a little northern exposure going on here. So I love it. But with Hank, let's kick it off. How did hazing become your career focus?
Not because I was hazed, but because I was at the University of Nevada, Reno, and we had a hazing death that was just off campus. But I had seen the initiation. At that time, hazing was rampant, not against the law in a lot of places. I had seen the initiations on campus. And then at a campus bar, I saw someone passed out at a pool table. He was foaming at the mouth. The organization was called the Sundowners, and their alumni are some of the leading citizens in Nevada. The initiation consisted of making people drink Everclear. And they would throw a match at their lips, so a lot of the people would burn.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was supposed to be funny. And
That's
so
shocking.
It was. So the person that was foaming, I got them to take him and walk him. But I think if I had called the police or so, they wouldn't have done it another time, and John Davies might still be alive. So they did it one more time, and they did this one not in public. They went to an Indian reservation, and John Davies died, and another pledge was without oxygen for a while. And so I've done database reporting since the 70s. So I made a database of all the hazing deaths that were out there. An editor friend of mine put me in touch with Human Behavior magazine. And so in the mid 70s, that first article came out, and I kept the database going ever since.
Wow. I can't even respond.
I think your database is really an important resource. And tell us more about how you receive information or reports that you put into your database, and how do you verify the accuracy of this information?
It's actually time consuming. I also on the page have a long list of deaths that are not considered hazing deaths, but appeared in the press as deaths. Some of these, in particularly around 1900, were with sensational reporting, and I had to track them to find out if these really did occur. So mostly it's from media reports, but people get in touch all the time. If there's a death, the chances of me talking to the parents within 2 or 3 days are very good. They're going to be calling for information. And that, I would say, is the most difficult part of doing this job. But it was a lot of time, and it was very expensive in the 70s. I had to pay for LexisNexis myself. I paid the New York Times for their database. And I started a listserv in the 80s, and people were sending in information on that listserv, which you still could find some places online. So I just kept at it over and over. And the good thing about being so public, if people disagree or want to talk about it, it's all out there with full disclosure where the information comes from.
What's the purpose of the database?
Because as I said before, there were a lot of deaths that did not occur that were listed. People were taking any alcohol-related death at all and calling it hazing. And so I was trying to break down the details as much as anything else. The next database I'll do will be all these sexual hazing cases involving athletes, and I hope to have that done next year.
I'm sure you're thinking about that because of the Yates versus Northwestern case. Am I correct?
Yes, a lot of phone calls about that.
And we're seeing a real rise in those sorts of cases in our practice, that we handle the issue from all different angles. So I think that's really important work you're doing.
Yeah, I applaud you. What I want to know in your work, because we address this, so I'm going to ask you a very selfish question because I want to know the answer, and I'm sure Christina does too. So much of hazing is shrouded in secrecy, and the members of hazing protect each other. What's the best way for a person who's a victim of hazing to gather the evidence to expose what's going on, especially in a culture of silence?
The way I try to do things is I go to the alums, people who've graduated a year or two earlier, and that's very, very quickly after a death when I'm doing a story. Talking to the alums, yes, some of them will shut the phone on you, but others will talk about it, and it's a good way of getting into the middle. I try to talk to the advisors and get information from them. If you just talk to people on campus, hazing isn't as shrouded in secrecy as you think. People are going to be talking to their significant others. So it's not the secret that fraternity members would like to think that it is.
Or sports organizations, correct?
Yeah, for sport. Well, one of the big problems is they don't consider it hazing.
No, we know. We get it. We get it.
I think it's. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that I think it's also important to point out, and I'd like to hear more of your thoughts. I think often hazing is sort of conceptually conceived of as just happening among young men in fraternities. And in fact, it spans across all student organizations, entities, athletic teams, military groups, and it's also not exclusively a male issue. I mean, Susan and I have plenty of case experiences involving female athletes in hazing. Can you talk a little bit more about what you're seeing in the breakdown, and is there any rise in female hazing in your research?
Generally, what are the trends?
Yeah, I don't really see a rise. I think it's consistent. We've not had a death this year or last year, but we've had so many close calls. So people would like to think that we have a trend of deaths ending. We don't. The people were lucky. Maybe what's happening is they're quicker to call 911 and not to just drop somebody off at the hospital where a few deaths have happened.
Or leave them at the foot of the stairs like at Penn State.
Yeah, he was just left alone there, but several times members have gotten frightened and taken somebody to the hospital and just dropped them off at the emergency, and it's too late at that particular point. From what I saw in the one case, people went from standing up to being dead drunk in just a short amount of time. So they're there talking, and then suddenly it hits them. That case of foaming at the mouth was the most dramatic that I've ever seen.
I can't imagine. I just can't imagine what that must have been like and how that experience has obviously stayed with you. Hank, I'm curious. I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether you think schools should abolish Greek life, fraternities, sororities, or do you think that there's value in these organizations?
With certainty, abolish pledging, not abolish Greek life. I taught 18 years at Franklin College. We didn't have any incidents. I was the advisor to the Honor Society there, which is male and female. And, we had positive initiations that could not in any way, shape, or form be considered hazing. And the students brought their parents or grandparents, to the ceremony. But for me, it's like a mathematical equation. Pledging equals hazing, hazing equals pledging. In terms of sports, get rid of the word rookie and stop this kind of dominant, subordinate culture that we have out there. And the other is a lot of the coaches will either turn their heads or say, don't take it too far. And that is very, very common. Now, it's very, very dangerous for coaches to do that. If you say, don't take it too far, you're allowing it. And if alcohol is involved, it is going to go too far.
Hank, just to kind of turn the question and turn the dial a little differently, there are the extreme cases of alcohol. The one you described, you witnessed, is horrific. And we've also worked on some pretty scary cases. But I have to say, we've also worked on cases where activities were labeled as hazing and taken as this serious infraction. I don't know. I didn't think it was so serious. I want to give you an example and get your response. We worked on a case where there was a pledging, and when the pledges went active, there was a champagne shower like they do after car racing.
Yay, celebrate. Yep.
That was investigated for being hazing. I don't think that's hazing. What do you think?
I broke it down into criminal hazing and non-criminal hazing. Certainly, with something that you're describing, I would have never gotten into this kind of thing. The hazing that I had as a fraternity member was being dropped off in the country. We knew about it ahead of time and had money to call friends. So when you look at it that way, you don't think it's so bad. But then you look at Grove City College in Pennsylvania, 4 pledges were killed in a line as they were walking. And actually, alcohol wasn't involved for them when they were in the middle of nowhere. So the problem is that what would look like innocent fun, sometimes things go wrong. In that case, it's a hard line between what's hazing and what's an accident. And in talking to fraternity advisors, you can't punish the same way. You can't punish somebody for having a pledge pin the same way that you would for having them drink a handle of alcohol. But in some cases, hazing is hazing, and it's punished that way. It doesn't make any sense at all.
So how do you define hazing?
Hazing to me would be any activity that's silly, dangerous, or repulsive that's done to newcomers by veterans in order to bring them into the organization.
Why silly? Is it because you think it's humiliating and embarrassing?
Well, no, we were talking about the things that you said were not so bad.
Yeah.
Like for me, I think it says something about male attitudes toward women when baseball players make each other dress up and go on the plane in women's clothing or so on. But what about singing a song? Singing your fight song. That was in the movie Paper Lion. Alex Karras was in that particular movie. George Plimpton, who I interviewed about it, was pretending to be a player, a quarterback on the Detroit Lions, and he brought out a lot of that. So that kind of culture is still there. The only problem is, and there's no real study on it, are people going to take it farther if you have this kind of dominance? Somehow it got into from singing to tying people up to a goalpost. And these are big, burly guys fighting back, and people have been injured. Or hockey, it's gotten sexualized, as you probably have seen in your research.
We have.
Band, yeah, band is very physical. Look at the death of Robert Champion. And when you were talking about different kinds, I mean, so when I'm talking to parents in 2018 in South Carolina, the parents were of a band member, they're fraternity members. Interestingly enough, no sorority moms have gotten involved. I don't know exactly why it is, but the activists are the parents of fraternity members. And Kathleen Wyatt, for example, in Ohio, is a big activist. Got law. And before I took a job at Fairbanks, by the way, I was the editor of the Salina paper in Ohio.
Oh, sure. Hank, many of our listeners are parents of high school and college students. And so based on your experience and knowledge with this subject, what are some of the warning signs that parents, but also students, should be aware of and look out for regarding hazing within organizations?
Well, there's like a personality change. A good way that a young woman put it, who was hazed at DePaul with having cigarettes put between her legs and burnt. And has
oh my gosh. Wow.
That's torture.
That's
torture.
And there was alcohol involved. That one was interesting. It was Kappa Kappa Gamma. They were members of a family within the organization. And this happened at Chico State too, where the family has their choice of alcohol. The one death, Adrian Heidemann at Chico State, it was brandy. These young women, I can't remember what their alcohol was, but they had to drink that particular liquor. And so with that particular case, the warning signs were that she lost her bubbliness. And that's the best description I could give. That she, the young woman, had been dancing. She grew up with ballet. When I interviewed her, she was working in a pizza parlor. And she had put on quite a bit of weight with stress. And that was one interview. Another young woman who kind of fought back and later got her PhD in family studies fought back. So people have just different kinds of reactions. Mine with the case of having to go out, I didn't really think that much about it because we had somebody pick us up right away. But if somebody had gotten killed on one of those marches, I'd be looking at it differently. If the death hadn't occurred at Nevada Reno, I certainly never would have written about hazing.
You have written 4 books, is that correct?
Yeah, 4 books. And then I have a novel which has hazing of Basques and Chinese in the early United States.
And you've also written a play, correct? The Broken Pledge?
Yes, it was a winner of an Anne Frank Award at Buffalo State University. It used to be Buffalo State College. And I got to put my one-man play on. And I've put that play on for athletes, and they call it Death of a Rookie. And then there's the Broken Pledge, which is about fraternity members, but it's pretty much the same. A grandfather buries his grandson that day and is overcome with grief, hatred, asking where God was when this occurred, losing his faith, and then turning it around with quotations that were in his son's diary from Martin Luther King. So I hope it's as powerful as I think.
Well, I have to tell you, I watched a lot of it and I thought it was incredibly poignant. How is it that you keep able to turn out content on this one issue and see so many angles and sides of it? It's impressive.
Yeah, I think part of it is by talking to the parents and to other and experts and people that are in the Greek world. They have the insights too. So I had interviewed Louis L'Amour one time, and he said, it's not that we're so clever. We're a sponge, we're a filter, and we take all of this in. So I think I have to give credit to other people for their perspective and how they see things. But I do have a good memory. And
What's next? What's next for you, Hank, on the horizon of this project?
Okay, so we'll be doing that database that I told you about with sexual hazing. I have a chapter coming out for the University of Toronto Press out in 2024 with my own experiences, which will be on athletic hazing. I'm putting together in the garage, I've got all these files, putting together all the hazing incidents I can find and to do those as a database as well. It's a little more difficult when you're working as an editor than when you're teaching. The amount of free time is not quite as much. And now it's politics coming up, elections in
Sure.
Ohio and in Alaska.
Mhm.
I won't have as much time at all. This weekend, I'll be in that office constantly.
We've talked a lot of heavy things, and we always like to give our listeners something a little positive as well when, contemplating our various topics. So can you share with us, in your experience, any success stories of schools, institutions, specific organizations that have really tackled this issue of hazing and essentially turned a really negative situation into a positive to recreate culture surrounding this issue?
Yes, Alfred University did that. They had the death of Chuck Stenzel, which was the subject of my book, Broken Pledges. It came out in 1989. But they got rid of the Greek system also. And there were a lot of lawsuits with that. But Dr. Norm Pollard and a colleague of his were the ones that did the first high school hazing surveys. They also did surveys of fraternity members. I got to help write the questions for that, but they did most of the work. That was a big, big turnaround. And the impetus was not only the death of Chuck Stenzel, they had a bad football hazing. And I don't think they lost the season, but they did suspend the team for a game or two. So yes, that was the turnaround. My personal story is I spoke at Penn State, and not 2 weeks later, at Penn State, I got a phone call from the advisor at that particular time to say that they had the sorority, not hazing, had a woman take way too much alcohol, near 0.40 BAC.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
The young women did not want to make the call. And one person who heard the talk, they all heard the talk. One person insisted, and they saved this young woman's life. So
And it only takes one person. It only takes one student to reach out for help, that bystander intervention to stop something horrific.
And it only takes one idiot in the room sometimes, especially if that person is physically powerful, to cause all these bad things as well. You hear that over and over again. So when there was a death of a lacrosse player at Western Illinois University, the punishment for the players, which was interesting, they were all fraternity members too, was to have a writer come in and go through the hazing with them, not the alcohol related part, which was 15 bottles put on stands, but to go into the river, to go marching through, to go to the house. So I'd be able to write about that. In a way, I felt like I was punished as well, because I did that at my own expense. And then it went into a book. But over and over, what's the point? The point is they kept pointing to the student coach, who not only did this, but instigated so that they would get the team credit card and put gas into their own vehicles. And each one had the same story. I thought somebody else would step up. Over and over, I kept hearing that same thing. And guess what? The instigator would not talk to me. He never went to jail either. The judge did not follow through. But yeah, there was one perpetrator who was the prime mover.
How can we get coaches to get on board?
Great question.
Really difficult. So I talked at a Quaker school in Delaware, athletic director, a female, really against all kind of hazing, really working. Football coach, a veteran, comes up to me later and said, yeah, this is all fine, but we're not going to take it too far. I thought, geez, you just heard this whole talk. You saw the pictures of the kids on the screen, and you're going to tell me this? And so then also when I was at Regis in Denver, I was talking, the athletic director was very much against it, talking to the different coaches. And I asked the coach after, what would happen if you heard there was hazing on your team? Would you punish them? And he said, starter or reserve?
I was just going to say, I mean, obviously in particularly collegiate athletics and, big schools, coaches are often evaluated based on their, their winning record. And so it's decision for them to make when, a hazing perpetrator is also a star athlete. And we just hope that the coach makes the right choice in terms of promoting student safety versus thinking about, wins and losses over truly in the long run, what's best for the team from a cultural perspective and student safety perspective.
I think that especially as kids just went back to school, everybody wants to feel a sense of belonging. School can be a very lonely place, both high school and college. And we have to train people that abuse is not the way to bond.
Yeah. And here in Fairbanks, there was a case I never heard about until I came here, where the football coach called it team bonding to have the players jump into the swimming pool and take off all their clothes, the sweatshirts and everything, put them back on while in the pool. And there were 3 near deaths. And he forbid his assistants to jump into the water until it was almost too late. And he lost his job. But I never heard about it because our paper, in covering it, called it what he called it, a team building or team bonding.
Sure. Right.
So I've written about that since and called it hazing, exactly what it is.
Well, this has really been a treat to speak with you.
Sorry.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, Hank, and I think that you're obviously a wealth of knowledge on this topic. So we really appreciate your knowledge and insights and encourage our listeners to check out your wealth of material on the topic as well, your books and your database.
You are worth the wait. Really. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for listening to Real Talk with Susan and Christina. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. And leave us a review so other people can find the content we share here. You can follow us on Instagram. Just search our handle @StoneSupler. And for more resources, visit us online at studentdefense.kjk.com. Thank you so much for being a part of our Real Talk community. We'll see you next time.